Welcome to Toffee TV. Today I am joined by journalist and author Simon Hart. Simon, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. It's good to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You're not in the UK though, are you? You've experienced a different type of lockdown than we have over. You're in Spain, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I've been experiencing quite a strict lockdown here in the south of Spain, in Granada. We had 7 weeks where we couldn't go out to exercise anyway. So that was yeah, it was quite challenging, really. So you saw the images of what was happening back in the UK. Sorry. The images of what was happening back in the UK and where people seemed to have a bit more freedom, but here it was really quite strict. So after that 7 week point where we were allowed to go out for a walk or a jog, people went a bit mad. Everyone was out exercising for a bit. I'm not sure how long that will last for, but it's a welcome change.
It's not a bad habit to get into though, is it? Doing a bit of exercise. I know it's. I spoke to Kevin Ratcliffe, who'd been over in Spain as well, and he'd said that a similar. You just weren't allowed out. You had to stay in, and the apartment he was in wasn't very well air conditioned, and all that. So it's obviously very difficult. We've had it totally different here. We've been able to go out and exercise, and that's become more relaxed. So at least we've had that kind of break. But for likes of yourself, that must have been really tough. 7 weeks is a long time to be locked inside for, and you've done well to look so well then, mate, having been banged up for 7 weeks or so.
Yeah, well, as you can see, I've not been to a hairdresser's for a while. Although I saw David Maddock on your show and thought it was the Toffee TV look. I thought that's what the viewers wanted.
This
Um,
this is it. Look
but
at mine. Mine's living. I've got scally curl. I've got hair like you at the back here now. My it's gonna need like an axle grinder or something to cut my hair when I go back. It's gonna be berserk. But what have you made of obviously the work that you do, and as I said this to David Maddock last week, with no football at the moment, it's such a strange time, isn't it? And we've seen obviously the Bundesliga has come back, so that's been a little bit of football for us to watch. But what have you made of the whole situation?
yeah, I confess I've not watched any of the Bundesliga stuff. I've been in quite a long magazine piece for one of UEFA's magazines. They do a publication called The Technician, which is part of the monthly magazine, and that's all about how coaches have been working with players throughout this period, which is really interesting. Sort of hearing the different challenges they've had. I mean, in Holland and Belgium, for example, where the league stopped, they were just not sure what to do with players. When you suddenly look at an empty calendar until August or potentially beyond that. Do you keep them in for a few weeks? Do you give them a bit of work on the grass? And I think they did that just to get them kicking the ball again. I spoke to somebody at Barcelona, the first team fitness coach, and he said that some of their players were quite enjoying having that extra time, with their families, which they're not used to. I guess if you've been on the treadmill as a top footballer, playing Champions League every other week, playing international tournaments, you've just not had that maybe since you were, I don't know, 15. So that amount of time at home. So I found that interesting, just hearing the different stories, how people have dealt with this. Some have obviously dealt it better than others. Somebody made a comment that for young players, this could be a good moment because they're actually used to playing, in under 23 football, empty stadiums. They can get themselves up for that. So it'll be fascinating to see, who comes out of this, hits the ground running, and who adapts better, and if they're going to be fit, what will the intensity be like? Playing without the crowd behind you. Somebody he's head of the UEFA injury study group. They did a paper recently where they've analysed pre-seasons for the last 15 years, about 44 clubs across Europe, and he reckons that 6 weeks is sort of the bare minimum you need. And he was saying, with all these tours abroad, players aren't getting enough training sessions. So if 6 weeks is stretching it, then what about 3.5 or 4 weeks? So I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. They're saying 6 weeks isn't long enough, but I suppose what will be different with this one, I suppose, and we won't know, is they weren't allowed to go off and go on holiday, and I know that, listen, nowadays players come back looking the same as when they finished, you know, from a time when we can remember a bit, you know, the 80s, 90s, whatever, they come back, even the noughties probably, they come back a stone overweight after getting back into shape. It isn't quite like that now. And I know that a lot of these players have had individual training programs that they had to keep up. So maybe 4 weeks might get them back up. What I've noticed with the Bundesliga, Simon, is that the first week, I thought it was technically very good, but it was a slower pace, and we've seen that pace quicken in the last, I think, the 4 games in now. The pace has gone up a level. Just to touch on what you'd said before, what's really interesting is how players are going to be able to cope with the mental side of empty stadiums. And what you said about the 23s was something me and Ped had said on one of the shows we did yesterday, was some of those players will be able to take to it better than others because, you know, they are used to that. So it'll be like almost normal for them. So looking at an Everton perspective, say, the likes of Anthony Gordon might, you know, it won't be any different to him from what he's experienced. So it's an interesting one, but it's going to be very strange watching it come back with no crowd, because let's be honest, it's going to be, it seems like it's going to be that way, I would suggest, for the rest of this year. I don't see how fans are going to be back in stadiums while there's no vaccine, or certainly while there's no drugs that they can say 9 times out of 10 this will ensure you don't die, because that's what we're looking for, aren't we? We're trying to buy time that medicine can help us recover, and we're not at that stage. So I don't see any way they're going to put people back in a stadium. So it's a huge challenge for football clubs to be and players to get themselves up to a level, and then see how they perform. And what we've seen in Bundesliga is, I think there's been 7 home wins in something like 13 or 14%, which is mad, because normally I think the Premier League's up at around 60-70% home wins. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we follow that pattern, isn't it, when it does resume.
Yeah, this morning I spoke to the head of press at Cologne, and they lost last night to Leipzig 4-2 at home. He was saying that we went 1-0 up early, and you know, if we'd had a crowd behind us, it's a completely different game. You know, you've got a lead to defend. You know, you're gonna have to defend against a better team like Leipzig, but with that extra, even if it's 2%, the home crowd give you, you know, you find the extra legs to close down spaces and so on. So I mean, the Goodison factor won't be there, will it? Which doesn't help in that respect.
No, that's one of the things that'll be interesting. Is Goodison a positive, or is it when it's getting a little bit gnarly, is it a negative for the players? That's going to be really interesting. We know it's a positive because when the crowd are behind us, we win games. You know, we've seen that. But also it's a difficult place to play if we're not playing well. So it'll be interesting just to see what Everton do. I'm really interested to see how the likes of Liverpool do with no crowd. You know, do teams go to Anfield and I've got no fear factor because there's not 50,000 Liverpool fans there. Are Liverpool really that good that they'll beat them anyway? Probably, but it'll be interesting to see. Same with Manchester United. Teams go to Old Trafford, 76,000 normally, no one there. You know, will teams go? And this is what we're seeing in Bundesliga. We've seen some teams like Werder Bremen go away and win games they probably wouldn't have won, and with crowd and are getting themselves out of the mire a little bit. So it is going to be interesting from that point of view. It's never going to be the same, and I know some people are very upset about it coming back, but it's a business and they need to play, otherwise they wouldn't be playing. That's the way I look at it, without the monetary side, because the sensible thing, I guess, would have been just to do what France have done and gone, we'll be back in September, but the monetary side of it doesn't enable that, does it? So you know, what one thing this lockdown has done, say, is it's given us a chance to look at a lot of other things, a lot of retro stuff, a lot of reminiscing. And first and foremost, the Howard's Way film. I haven't asked you about it. We know that you've seen it. It's a fantastic film, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I, of course, like any Evertonian of sort of our age, it takes you back. it tells you things you didn't know. It just leaves you with this, with a warm glow of nostalgia. The music is fantastic as well. They just get the music right. I love that sequence in the Cup Winners' Cup final where they're passing the ball around and it feels like heaven. Fiction Factory comes on. That was one of my favourite moments. But I mean, the job Rob did was terrific. Having done a book on that era and knowing some of the stories, good timing. To see them, on the screen and to see. I mean, obviously, I didn't speak to all of the players from that '85 team, so to see what it meant to Andy Gray, for example, to hear Sharpie talking, it was fabulous. I can't believe there's an Evertonian out there who hasn't watched it by now. I mean, there's just no excuses there, really.
No, especially now it's on Sky Documentaries. But I mean, the reason why I went to the Howard's Way film was because of the book as well, because you've obviously, you've written this book, The Here We Go, which you can get available all good bookshops, Amazon, Simon Hart, check it out. But there's great stories in there, and that was what I was going to say, because you've got these stories together in your book, and I was just reading the Derek Mountfield stuff before again. You've got that stuff down in the book, so that must have been interesting for you as well to have got a perspective of those stories, but then to see them out on the, out getting played out on the screen as well must have kind of strengthened what you'd found when with the people you'd interviewed for the book. Well,
to be honest with you, I was kicking myself after watching Rob's film because he went for the definitive story, and he got it. Whereas with the book, I was trying to sort of go down some of the less explored paths and speak to some of the sort of the fringe people, like say Paul Wilkinson, Paul Power, and then Rob's gone in there and he's given you everything. So I guess there's no point saying it like that, but I couldn't help hearing this little voice in my head. But anyway, it's nice to see the tales, and it's brilliant, and I loved every minute of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great book, and again, it's for people who want to read the story, because there's a lot in there that obviously doesn't come out in the film, because you're trying to keep it, condense the film to whatever it was, 190, 90 minutes, wasn't it? Same as a football match. So you've got the stories here from the book, which is brilliant, because there's lots of in-depth stories. So check that out as a blue. Here we go. It's a great book on that 80s. While we're all nostalgic and celebrating 35 years since we won the league and we won the Cup Winners' Cup, check that book out as well, because it is brilliant. And don't feel like you've missed stuff outside, that you've missed the thing, because you've got together a lot of brilliant stories there. But I hope you watched the Andy Gray interview I did, because there's a lot of stuff in that which he talks about. So if you haven't seen it, check that one out, because Andy Gray's very open as well. He's brilliant. But another thing, what we've seen, and BT have been really good at this, is the old, 30 years since Italia 90. The BBC have had some stuff on as well. We've seen going back to World Cups, and they had stuff on the 82 World Cup, which was the first I remember and my favourite one, because Zico and Socrates and Paolo Rossi and all of those players. But Italia 90, 30 years ago this summer, and that was an incredible World Cup. It was, I'll be honest, it was probably the last time I was a true England fan, whereas it devastated me when we got knocked out. Absolutely. I remember having teary eyes when Waddle missed the penalty against Germany in the semi, and thinking we're never going to win the World Cup. And here I am now, and it doesn't bother me anywhere near as much now, and we still haven't won it. But going back to Italia 19, your book, which is called World in Motion, which you can get, which is a fantastic book, and you come in and chatted to us about it when you brought it up. But I just thought it's a great time, the summer, where there's no championships. We thought we were getting the Euros this year, and obviously the pandemic's put pay to that. But Italia 90, just to start off with, was an absolutely incredible World Cup, wasn't it? And what was the reason behind your book? What was the idea for your book?
I think it was a great World Cup because of the stories, not necessarily because of the football, just because of the drama and the different, really strong kind of storylines involving different countries. And the idea of the book was, I think by now everyone knows sort of England's story, the impact it had here. And with the book, we wanted to just explore, what did it mean in Cameroon? What was the impact in Eastern Europe, where, You know, it was the last World Cup before the Iron Curtain came down. What did it mean in the States? It was their first World Cup since, I think, the 50s, if I remember right. So we were just looking at all these different, you know, around the world. What was it about? Do they remember it as fondly? Do they remember it with regret? And, you know, certainly in Eastern Europe, it's very bittersweet because they had, you know, those communist countries had whatever the sort of downsides, the lack of freedom with communism. They had educational structures for sport, you know, incredible facilities, and they brought through young players, and they had strong leagues, you know, the Yugoslavian League, the Soviet League, and, you know, all that just crumbled away in the years after Italia 90. So I found that really fascinating, that side of it. So anyway, that was the idea of the book, just to see what was the impact around the world of it.
Yeah, it was an amazing World Cup, and started on the Caniggia game, Caniggia getting chopped down in the opening games, or, you know, and it was just absolutely incredible. And the story of Cameroon, like you've said, and it was all of, you know, the Gaza stuff, and England. But as from an England perspective, we were terrible. In the group stages, weren't we? You know, Mark Wright headed against Egypt, I think, got us through. In the end, we drawn with Ireland. Sheedy scored, didn't he? We drew 1-1 with Ireland, and did we have a 0-0 as well? I think. Was it 0-0, and then Holland, yeah, and then obviously Mark Wright scored the header against Egypt to get us through. But, you know, the story of Scalacci, you know, all of those little stories that it threw up at that time was, and being in Italy as well, which is obviously a hotbed of football, made it incredible. And that's what's happened with the book is there is a lot of different things. It's not just a normal World Cup book that you would see, which just takes you through. There's a lot of other stories and threads that run through it, which has made it really, you know, made it a World Cup to remember. And obviously Nessun Dorma, which is you know, the song that is synonymous with World Cup football, probably more than any other song, I would suggest, isn't it, really, you know, when you think back to it. So incredible. And you were telling me before we come on air about there's a Twitter account, and I'm going to say it wrong, Venezia, is it? Vincere, there you go, Vincere, and they're almost paying homage to the World Cup from when it started each day with a podcast. Is it? Just explain a little bit about it, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, during the lockdown, I've been involved with this. It's a podcast, an Evertonian called Mark Godfrey, it's his sort of brainchild, and he's recorded one episode for every day of that World Cup. So looking back, so he'll put it out on the 8th of June, talking about the opening game, the opening day, and there'll be one right through to the 8th of July in the final. And he's brought different guests in. Kevin Sheedy's on one of them. Thomas Berthold, the man who Gaza fouled to get his yellow card, and hence all the tears and so on. So we owe Thomas Berthold thanks for that. Pierre Liborski, a great German winger. Some different people who make an appearance. Pete Davis, who wrote All Played Out, like brilliant book about 1990 World Cup. Pete's on it quite a lot, given his memories, because he was there. I don't know if you've read the book, but he was there in the England camp. So he's got some great tales. It's a brilliant book. It became One Night in Turin. They made the documentary on the basis of Pete's book.
Yeah, brilliant. Are you on it then, Simon? Surely you're on it.
I make the odd appearance, yeah. I'm not the talent. Pete Davis is the talent. I'm sort of just filling in. I'm kind of like the Alan Harper. I come in when they need me.
Is that what it is? Come in and perform? Well, Alan Harper was brilliant, so... come in, do the job, and then disappear back into the shadows. That's what you're trying to say. I mean, what's your overriding memory of that World Cup though? When you think back now, because obviously a lot of people will go Gaza crying and obviously Waddle missing penalties or whatever. But I mean, what's yours when you think back to that World Cup? What's your overriding memories of it?
Well, we're a similar age. My first World Cup I remember watching was '82. So for me, it was the excitement of, maybe it was the last World Cup where I didn't know any of these players. Nobody in England knew who Cyril Makanaki was, or Benjamin Massing, these Cameroon players. And I think that was the beauty of a World Cup then. You had all these stories and you didn't know them. There was no Champions League on the telly.
No.
Even that year, the European Cup final wasn't on TV. And that's the European Cup final. So suddenly you get a month of football, and it's Christmas Day every day for a month. It's not like today where, I guess, if you're 21, you all you know until this lockdown is wall-to-wall football. So for us, it was, that's what I remember, just the excitement of, you go home and every day there's a game of football on, or 2 or 3. And then you get all these characters you never heard of. I mean, Scalacci, who's Scalacci? And you find out who Scalacci is. And actually, in Italy, he'd come from nowhere. He never scored for Italy until that World Cup. He only scored one more goal after, but for 1 month, he was, he was the man. Roger Miller came out to semi-retirement. So you had all these brilliant. Gaza hadn't. When England played Italy in the previous November or December '89, Gaza was in the England B team playing at Brighton Stadium against Italy B, and Scalacci was playing for Italy B, and that just kind of sums up the parallel journeys out of really, well, not obscurity, but they weren't expected to be the stars that they were in that tournament. Whereas now, we watch a World Cup and, oh yeah, he played for Wigan, he's at Brighton, you know all these players. So I think that for me, that was it.
I think that you've just hit the nail on the head with what it was like for us as kids seeing that. I mean, the '82 World Cup, I remember, still clear as day, running home from school. Got out at school at about 2 minutes to 4, and I sprinted home, ran in. England were playing France. Brian Robson scored after 27 seconds with a header. I literally sat me butt on the floor as he headed it in to give us the lead, and it was in a tight ground with tight nets. I think we won 3-1. Paul Mariner, I think, got the third. And you're right, going into those World Cups, Brazilian were the only time you ever seen them, because they weren't in Europe. And so it was so exciting seeing Zico and Eder and Socrates and Falcao and Serginho, who wasn't like a Brazilian forward, he was like a European striker, big, tall, strapping centre forward. And seeing all the little interchange, Junior, they were incredible, all the Italians, Paolo Rossi and Tardelli and everything, and going through it. And you didn't know the African nations when they come into it, and nowadays you know everything. And especially if you're interested in football, we see and consume more football than anything. I know more players who've playing all over the world than you'd ever would have thought you'd know. So that World Cup was the time where these people would just drop into your screen who you didn't know much about. And I think that's why people kind of made them, said they were better players than maybe they were at times as well. And it's why a lot of clubs bought these players on the back of those tournaments, and he never really done anything. And El Hadji Diouf, yes, I'm looking at you. Those kind of players who had great World Cups, Salih Dow. Dow, who Liverpool bought the 2 of them, didn't he? Because, Senegal were brilliant in 2002 World Cup, was it? So that was, but going back to when you're right, we knew nothing about these players. So it was an absolute pleasure to watch every game, 3 games a day at times, to see these players who we'd never heard of or anything. Amazing.
Yeah, and 90 was the last one like that, because of course 92 you had Sky coming in with the Premier League, so the satellite age began. The Champions League, that rebranding took place 92. So really, and also I think the people who rebranded the Champions League, they looked at Italia 90. In fact, there were some people who were involved in the 90 project, or putting 90 together, and that kind of operatic packaging with the trying to make football look classy, and they then end up with the Champions League anthem, which is based on a bit of classical music. So in a way, you can see 90 being. I'm not saying it changed everything, because change was already coming, but it was definitely a factor, I think. So another reason why it's a fascinating time.
Really interesting that with the Champions League thing. I hadn't really put those two together, but yeah, it is modelled very much on how Italia 90 was presented, isn't it? With that, you've got your classical music, you know, and it's all operatic, and it's a theatre and everything. And if that's come out, if the market men have come from Italia 90 into Brandon for the Champions League, you can actually see the thread that runs right through it. And you're absolutely right. That was probably the time it did change for. Some will say for the better, some will say for the worse, you know, but whatever it was, it changed from then, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've Pete Davis, who's on this podcast a lot. Pete's very much of the view that football was terrible in the 80s, and that always makes my hackles rise a bit because as an Evertonian, and he's saying, oh yeah, you know, I used to go to Stamford Bridge and it was awful, but you know, Goodison Park wasn't an awful place in the 80s. You know, I had some of my best times then, and it was a good stadium. You know, I was there going there as a boy. I wasn't seeing trouble. Maybe I wasn't going to the right places for trouble, but you know, so when people say, you know, that black and white thing, rubbish before, brilliant after, I wouldn't buy into, but certainly it did change on that. Yeah, so. It's an interesting, just such an interesting time, and I think the fact the world was changing as well. You know, you look at that Yugoslavia team, who was so good, and you know, I spoke to Panchev, who was, you know, he the next year he was, I think, he was the top scorer in the Champions League, and Red Star Belgrade won the European Cup in '91. And somebody like that really regrets the way football's changed, because back then, you know, Red Star Belgrade could compete in these tournaments, whereas I think before they beat Liverpool in the Champions League the year before last, they'd not won a game in the European Cup this century. You know, for a big club like that. So I think something's been lost. I don't think it's just middle-aged fellas like us being over nostalgic.
No, it's definitely. Listen, people. Well, you'd always, you know, what you experience sets you on your journey, doesn't it? But I think football for me in the 80s, and seeing the change at a Everton level, you know, at a league first division level as it was when I started fully getting into it, seeing teams like Watford come through the leagues to finish runners up, seeing Aston Villa win the European Cup, you know, and win the league, then the European Cup, Nottingham Forest, and these teams used to come to Goodison with 8, 9 brilliant players. Nowadays, they're just plucked off. They're just plucked off, and those lads go and sit in the bench somewhere at Chelsea and things like that. So that's changed. And then from a European perspective, like you've said, you know, Red Star Belgrade, incredibly, you know, Darko Panchev, what a name from the past, you know, great player. And a lot of these European countries, it was difficult to get results in. They had great players, but because of the way football is and the money men and everything else now, they get plucked early. So those players, you see a good player coming up, they're just taken because the money's available in other countries that isn't in their country. So they don't stay around. I'm thinking someone like Nikola Vlasic done okay, and we went, yeah, we'll have him because we've got a bit of money. And now he's playing in Russia. You know, he's playing in Russia, isn't he, for CSKA? But you're right, it's lost those teams, especially the Champions League. There's a real, it's just driven by money, which I think really loses the magic of it. It becomes very clinical, and I think that's what the Champions League is now. And I know people will say because Everton aren't in it, but I really don't find it that interesting, the Champions League. So I watch the final if Liverpool aren't involved in it, because it's a sunny night normally around now. Yeah. I'm normally in Wales, and it's the only thing to watch. You know, we have a beer and watch a game of football, but I'm not fascinated by it the way I probably was 15, 20 years ago when it was newish. Now I find it really sanitised, but that's just me. But footy was well better in the 80s, Simon, and I'm not having anyone saying it wasn't.
Well, just one other example for you on this. Yeah. One person I spoke to in the book is Ioan Lupescu, who he's from Romania. He played in the Romania team in 90 and in 94. And he was UEFA's technical director for a while in the last decade. He spoke really, I think, interestingly in the book about Romanian football and how it suffered, because 86, Red Star Bucharest win it, European Cup. 89, they're back in the final. he was in Dynamo Bucharest team, who I think reached the semis of the Cup Winners' Cup in '90. And Dynamo Bucharest were the club with the most players at Italia '90.
Right.
But obviously, because there were probably only 3 clubs from Romania who provided players
Yeah.
to the national team. But they had really good. They had that generation of Radu Hagi, Dumitrescu. I'm just Lukatus himself. Petrescu was coming through, really, really talented players who'd come through their system, which then disappeared when Ceausescu went. He was deposed at Christmas '89, and their hotel in at Italia '90 was basically he described it as a bazaar, because club managers would just turn up. None of those players had agents, and so one minute Radu was sharing a room with him,
Florian.
and one day. Yeah, Radu had in his room either the manager or the director of football of Anderlecht, and they verbally agreed, no agent, no translator, verbally agreed to go to Anderlecht. The next day, the fella comes back to sign papers, and they don't let him into the room because in the meantime he'd agreed to join Brescia, because Brescia were offering him Alfa Romeo. He couldn't drive. But and he said it's no wonder Ireland beat us, because all this is going on. He said it was like the Wild West. Their lives were completely changed. But then I know that this is funny and it's interesting, and they all became rich. But nowadays they look back and think, well, there's nothing in Romania now, and the only person who's really invested in youth there and an academy is Hagi. With that club he set up, Viitorul, which is a really sad indictment that it's taken Hagi to actually bother trying to develop players there. So their stories I found maybe one of the most, interesting angles of that book. Just the way it had changed for the Romanians, especially the way the way they lost to Ireland on penalties.
Pachy Bonner. Yeah. I mean, they had Georgie Hadzi was incredible. His lad plays for Rangers now, just signed permanently there, hasn't he? But Georgie Hadzi was unbelievable. His left foot and that kit, the yellow Adidas kit with the 3 blue. They were a brilliant side to watch. Just seems like that, wasn't it? Where we didn't know the players, a lot of players, and Petrescu obviously went to Chelsea, and we had Ili Dimitrescu who played at Tottenham, and we had the other kid at Tottenham, one with all the hair.
Who, Dimitrescu?
No, he was George, the centre back. Popescu. Yeah. Dimitrescu was the socks, wasn't he? The ankle socks over his, and they all followed it. In Algiard Elis' 5 up front, Ili Dimitrescu. But they were a brilliant side. But loads of brilliant stories from Italia '90, and get the book. Go and get the book. Now it's brilliant, especially now as well, and with no championships on. I think these kind of stories are really interesting, and there's lots of angles coming off it. And 30 years since Italia '90, why not celebrate with World in Motion by Simon Hart? Good Evertonian. Why not? And don't forget, check Simon out on that podcast as well. Simon, I'm going to let you go. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. If you've got anything else to talk about, get in touch with us. Come on, we'll speak to you again. Loads of good stories there, but go and enjoy the outside in Spain while you can. What are you doing in Granada, first of all, before you go?
I moved out here last summer.
Right.
My wife's from nearby, from the south of Spain, and she got a job down at the university here in Granada. So I, like a dutiful husband, I followed. But as a freelance journalist, doing stuff for UEFA, it's I can theoretically work from most places. So obviously it's just become suddenly a bit more challenging now that there's no travel and we're in lockdown.
Anywhere,
who knows when we'll travel? We'll be able to fly back to England again. Hopefully, at least within a few months. But it's up in the air. Well, not up in the air, as you might say, but for everybody at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, are Granada gonna become your surrogate team while you're there? Then some you keep an eye on, or are you not really interested in? Because La Liga is coming back, isn't it, on the 13th of June, a week before the Premier League?
It is. Granada have had a great season. They only came up last summer, and they were top of the league in October for about a week, which was for the first time since the early 70s. Then The last time I was at one of their games was the cup semi. They lost what they lost. Trying to get this right, they lost narrowly to Bilbao. They were ahead in the tie for about 5 minutes at one point late on. But that's the kind of night, you really appreciate now. The whole town was excited. The stadium was packed, and you realise now that, maybe we took that for granted a bit, because, we don't have that, and who knows when we'll have that again. But yeah, I can't have a second team. It isn't right.
You've got to have someone you look out for. Keeps your interest a little bit, especially taking in the local culture. You've got to, Simon. It's like you're not cheating on Everton. Everton is Everton, but you've got to.
But whenever anyone goes down there, all the crowd start whinging and holding up these cards, and I can't do that.
No, true. Don't get into all that. Just watch from afar, then see how they get on. Be happy for the area when they win. But I
can't do that either. I'm an Evertonian. I can't be happy.
All right, we've still got listen, we haven't lost for a few weeks, so we're all right. Right. We've got a couple of weeks to go before results start mattering again. But listen, Simon, it's been lovely to talk to you today. So make sure you stay safe. Listen, before I let Simon go, here we go. Book from about the 80s, tagging on to Howard's Way and everything that's, very much out there at the moment. 35 years since we won the league and the Cup Winners' Cup. Check that one out by Simon. And also World in Motion, which 30-year anniversary of Italia 90. Lots of fantastic stories in there, which we've spoken about. So check that out as well. Si, stay safe, look after yourself, and get your hair cut when you can.
I'm going for the Paul Wilkinson look.
Oh, well, just grow the moustache and you're full on Scouts 1985. You're living it.
Thank you. Thanks
for
having me on.
No worries, mate. Take care, Simon. Look after yourself, mate.
See you.
See you later. Bye. Big thanks there to Simon joining us from Spain. Make sure to check out the 2 books I said, Here We Go and World in Motion. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and if you want more videos, join us over on Patreon. See you later.